You've heard in ABC Radio News today, Immigration Minister Alex Hawke says the government's border policies haven't changed. This is as a family of Tamil asylum seekers are allowed to leave detention on Christmas Island and reunite in Perth. The family was removed from their home in Billawheeler here in Queensland in 2018 when their visas expired. And they've been on Christmas Island since 2019 following a series of court challenges to the visa decisions. So let's find out what the government's intentions are today with the LNP member for Petrie, Luke Howarth. Luke Howarth, thanks for coming on again this afternoon.
Thanks, Steve. Great to be on the show.
The Billawheeler family is to be reunited in Perth for now. What is the federal government's long-term intention with this family, Luke Howarth?
Well, I think the long-term intention all along has been for them to return to Sri Lanka. They are a Sri Lankan family and they've been found to be not owed protection, and that's not the government saying that. That's been found by several, by the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, by the Federal Circuit Court, by the Federal Court and by the full Federal Court and the High Court have all found that this family are not to be owed protection to Australia. So
why are they still here then?
Well, the issue is that they've been continuing to pursue their legal opportunities, and while that plays out, they'll continue to remain here. But ultimately, at one stage they were due to be flown back, and I believe that their supporters cut through fencing and chained themselves to the plane that was due to take them away. And there's been all sorts of issues, ongoing issues with this family. They're not Australian citizens; they are Sri Lankan citizens. And the position is that because the parents came illegally by boat, they've been deemed to be illegal maritime arrivals, both the mother and the father. And the government policy is that illegal maritime arrivals will never resettle in Australia.
Just clarify for me, I understand that they're not illegal maritime arrivals because they were seeking asylum. In other words, under Australians' international obligations, it is entirely legal to seek asylum in another country, to seek protection in another country, and that's what they were doing.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned before, there are people in Australia right now that came that way by boat that have been found to be refugees. And the courts have found them to be refugees, and now we're trying to find, because they came by boat, another country to resettle them, New Zealand, the US, and so forth. With the Sri Lankan family, they were found by all of those courts that I mentioned before, which don't always normally side with the government, mind you, but every single one of them have found that they are not refugees.
All right.
So it's not the government position, it's not my position. I've never met the family. I don't know the mum and dad, but this is the position of the courts that have found this. They have ongoing legal options before them, and when that, I assume that will take another 12 months at least. If they fail, then the government's position is that they will go back to Sri Lanka.
What is then the federal government's current policy in relation to refugees and asylum seekers like this couple originally were? So just restate for me or remind me of what the federal government's actual policy is in this area, because there's a large outcry, a large body of people that want this couple, this family, to stay.
Yeah, and look, I understand that, and I do, and I feel for their daughters who were born whilst over here in detention. I feel for them. They're only young kids. It's not their fault. But the federal government's policy, obviously, when we came into government in 2013, when we had 50,000 people arriving by boat and over 1,000 dead people at sea, including, lots of children. I don't know exactly how many children died at sea, but a lot. The thing was an absolute mess. And when we came in 2013, we had, where it was safe to do so, to turn boats around, to make sure that if people were found to be refugees, that they wouldn't be settled here. We'd seek other settlement arrangements, and we've done that for the bulk majority of people in different countries, including the US, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea and Nauru. But these people, the Billawheeler family, haven't been found to even be refugees by Australia's courts, and that's the position at the moment. We believe that we don't want to set a precedent and allow this family to stay. We believe that it'll just restart people smuggling if that is an opportunity. And for all of those people that are currently here that also have been found to be refugees, yet this family hasn't, once again, they'd be saying, well, look, this family hasn't even been found to be refugees. Why are you allowing them to stay when we've been found to be refugees and you're looking for a third-party settlement option for us?
So my assumption is then that when Alex Hawke, the immigration minister, says the government's policies haven't changed, that the end game here will not be that this family is allowed to return to the town that wants them, Billawheeler, but they'll be sent back to Sri Lanka. Am I right?
That's my understanding. It is, yes.
All right, so do we have treaty obligations with Sri Lanka? Because this couple clearly feel, as I understand it, they feel that their life is under threat if they return to Sri Lanka because they are Tamil people.
And my understanding is that it's very safe to return to Sri Lanka. The war ended in 2009 and it's safe for Tamil people to return back to Sri Lanka. In fact, the Minister said today that there's actually been hundreds, if not thousands of people return to Sri Lanka, not just from Australia but all over the world, within the last 12, 24 months and ongoing. And he feels it's very safe for them to do it. As I said, the government wanted to send them back to Sri Lanka several years ago, but for whatever reason, they continued to appeal and look for legal options and their supporters, and this is why it's dragged on.
Australia needs immigration. We need the labour that immigrants can provide, and we know that immigrants work hard and benefit this nation, which the Prime Minister himself often points out is a very multicultural nation. Aren't we sending mixed signals when we bend over backwards? So on one hand we say we want immigration, and on the other hand we bend over backwards to send immigrants back home because they don't fit some sort of bureaucratic tick box.
Yeah, look, I mean, this should not be confused with the federal government's position on immigration. We welcome immigration. We are a successful multicultural society, and we welcome immigration. I know in my own electorate, there's many people from, the Philippines, from India, from South Africa, from all over the world that have come here, and I regularly go to citizenship ceremonies, and people from all over the world, the Middle East, Northern America, wherever. And we want more people to come to Australia. Obviously at the moment we're in the middle of a pandemic and that's not possible, but we do want people to come by the right methods and the correct channels. As I said before, there was a huge mess, and this should not be forgotten when the coalition government came in 2013, the big mess that was created under the Rudd-Gillard Labor governments. And it was a huge issue. You will remember at the time, Steve, your listeners will remember at the time. And to be honest with you, we've seen this played out before under the Howard government, and when Kevin Rudd was elected, he said he was going to be an economic conservative. He said that he was not going to turn votes around. The fact is that he didn't. He weakened on these things. This family has not been found to have refugee status. The parents came by people smuggling boats separately to Australia about 9 years ago, and we're not changing our position when it comes to people smuggling operations. As I said, I feel for the two girls who have been in this position. Their parents have obviously kept them in this position. They could have went back to Sri Lanka. But I also remember the thousands of people that died at sea, including children. And that can never be repeated. Look, it's our policy. We believe it works well. We haven't had boats rocking up every day. Australians have forgotten about it, and we don't want to ever go back there. And so the government has enabled them to stay. The Minister has made a decision today that this family can continue to stay in Perth and basically will live in the community whilst they pursue all their legal options. And if the courts rule in their favour, well, great. But up to date they haven't. And if at the end of this time, in 12 months' time, if the courts do not rule in their favour, then the government will be sending them back to Sri Lanka.
My guest is the LNP member for Petrie, Luke Howarth. This is ABC Radio Brisbane at 16 minutes to 5. Let me move on to another issue. Does the federal government have any plans to address the overheated housing market that is currently underway in Australia? In the last 6 months, house prices have increased, almost 10% just in the last 6 months. I mean, that's extraordinary, if not dangerous growth. We've been hearing today of a UNSW report that where researchers believe that it's a major cause of economic inequality and economic instability in Australia. Does the federal government have any plans to address it?
Everything that we're doing, I mean, most of the levers are with state and state governments around the country and council, but something that the federal government certainly believe needs to be addressed is the issue of supply. Supply is the only way to improve affordability, and states control those supply policy levers, and they need to take advantage at the moment of the low migration scenario we find ourselves in at the moment right now to improve planning frameworks and infrastructure. And supply is the key issue, because at the end of the day it's a supply and demand issue, and in Queensland at the moment we're experiencing southerners that want to move here so there's pressure on local land developments. But we know that it takes a long time for land and supply to be developed. It's not uncommon for developers to have to jump through hurdles for up to 5 years before they can even list their first block for sale, and that's a long time to hold property. And all of those costs, which are often passed on from councils and state, are passed on to first home buyers as well. So, yeah.
All right. I'll leave it there, I think. Luke Howarth, thank you very much for your time once again.
Can I just mention one thing about Steve?
Yes,
in the last 12 years, we've had more first home buyers into the market than ever before this year. And the federal government, of course, does a lot through the National Housing and Homelessness Agreement, Commonwealth Rent Assistance, and we have a lot of policies in place for first home buyers with low deposit schemes, super saver schemes, and we now have a new policy for the family home guarantee for single parents to get into the market with as little as 2%. So I also mentioned last week when we were on the show about jobs in the regions, and some of those regions are still affordable too, where people can buy into those regions. I think last week we were talking about the Lockyer Valley, and there's places out there that you can rent for $260 a week at the moment and for sale for $249,000, and there's jobs there. So the supply is a key issue in relation to your question.
Thanks for coming on this afternoon, Luke Howarth.
Thank you.